We'll call the meeting of the Beltrami County Board to order. Stand for the pledge. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, we'll continue on to the citizens addressing the board. Anyone wishing to address the county board on an item not on the agenda may come forward at this time to be recognized by the board chair. Please state your name and address for the record. Comments are limited to 5 minutes. Personnel complaint against an individual county employee may not be heard initially at a board meeting. Personnel complaints may be submitted to the board in writing through the county administrator's office. A person addressing the board may not use profanity or vulgar language. Is there anyone wishing to address the board?
Hello, Jim Lukacek, 13318 Wildwood Road, Northeast. Back again. Just wondering if we're making any headway on some transparency and trying to get some information out to the general public on the redistricting issue. I continue to kind of lobby people and ask people, and just a lot of people don't know what took place. And I think that is a pretty important happening in our county. And I would appreciate commissioners paying attention to people that come up to the microphone to speak. I've been here a number of times and some commissioners don't even raise their heads and acknowledge me. It's kind of rude. I feel not good about that. With what's happening in nationwide, I think you all need to really try hard to think about transparency. I know as a county commissioner sitting for 14 years, there was way too many closed sessions as far as I'm concerned. But I know it always came down to county attorney, legal issues, certain things by law you can't discuss openly, all of that. But I just really encourage open meetings, transparency, get more information in your county newsletter. Don't let that just become a regular old dissemination of information. There should be more in there, and let us know what you as county commissioners are thinking about. Think about some long-range plans. Think about things that the general public doesn't know about, but really should know about. There just seems to continue to be at a local level, at a county level, at a state level, at a national level. There just gets to be a feeling for constituents that you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And if anybody's watching the network television, boy, there's a lot of things coming out. And I've often said, difference between Washington, D.C., St. Paul, Beltrami County, City of Bemidji, and the townships are simply decimal points. There's just as much things going wrong. There's just as much potential for fraud. You have to keep a very basic concept in mind, and that's been getting out of hand in the last 20 years. I asked Commissioner Carlson to get me some data on how many people have been coming into our county, how has our county grown, and how has our budget grown. In 2009, when I stepped up, our basic expenditure budget was about $50 million. When I stepped out 14 years later in 2022, 2023, that was up to $100 million. Now I realize that's passed through, it's coming from St. Paul, it's this and that and the other thing, but that has to stay comparable to the growth of your county. So I just encourage you to do your homework, look at the numbers. I always told everybody I was a numbers person, and I tried to look at numbers and look at budgets and look at comparisons. And I just encourage you to reach out to the constituents, be transparent, share as much as you can, be positive, and try to move the county forward. And I just would really encourage you all to give another consideration to an article regarding the redistricting. That's my personal matter that I'd like you to do. But overall, more transparency, the better off you are. You're going to gain those constituents' trust. The more things you can tell them, the more transparent, and get away from those closed meetings. Those are just a bugger. So appreciate your time. Thanks. I do appreciate what you do. I know exactly where you're sitting. Had my shoes in that seat for a long, long time. Thanks. And I get to go home.
Thanks, Luke. Anyone else? And no one's online, I assume? No. Okay, we'll move on then. Approval of the agenda. Commissioner Winger, do you have that?
I want to move to approve the agenda with the following changes. Move 7J to 10A. Move 7F to 10B. Move the federal and state to 10C. And the administrators to 10B. The D is this David.
So Commissioner Winger has made the motion with those changes to the agenda. Do I hear a second to that? I'll second it then. And we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Sumner,
Yes.
Commissioner Winger,
Yes.
Commissioner Gould,
Yes.
and I vote yes. The amended agenda is approved. On to the consent agenda. Look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Okay. Commissioner,
Mr. Chair,
yep, go ahead.
I would move the consent agenda as amended by removing 7J to 10A of the regular agenda, removing 7F to 10B of the regular agenda, and moving item 11 from the work meeting schedule to 10C of the regular agenda, and moving the administrator's update from the work meeting to 10D of the regular agenda.
Are you seconding it? Commissioner Winger already made that motion. Will you
Oh,
second
I'm
it?
sorry. I can't, he has to turn his mic on. I can't hear him.
Oh, yeah, he didn't have his mic on, sorry. So you're seconding the motion?
Yep. Okay, sorry.
That's all right, thank you. And we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Sumner,
Yes.
Commissioner Winger, Commissioner Gould,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So the consent agenda as amended is approved. On to the regular agenda. We have Assistant County Attorney new hire. Knock his top over or something. Okay,
Hello again, gentlemen. For those who don't know, I have had a vacancy since August that has gone unfilled since August. I also had a attorney go on leave for several months, so I was actually down 2 attorneys for most of the fall. So I've been in a fairly massive crisis staffing wise with the assistant attorneys. I have finally found somebody who is willing to take the job. In order to match their current pay, bringing in at step 7, I am simply asking permission to do so.
okay. Any questions for Attorney Henson? Looks like any, so I'll look for a motion to approve the.
Mr. Chair,
Yep, go ahead, Commissioner Carlson.
I would make a motion to approve the hire of the Assistant County Attorney at grade 17, step 7.
Commissioner Carlson and Commissioner Gould seconds the motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Commissioner Gould?
Yes.
Commissioner Winger? Commissioner Sumner?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we have approval 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you up for the next one or is
It
it?
is the Dave Hansen show today.
All right. Go ahead and talk about the juvenile diversion program funding.
Yeah, so, and I think I was here about 18 months ago, to present, give a presentation on the juvenile diversion program that we run through my office. It is one of the most robust in the state, and I'm very proud of the work that we do. We collaborate with the Bemidji Services Area Collaborative, BASC, to facilitate most of the work of the diversion program. Part of it's done in-house with my assistant county attorney who does the juvenile work, and then my legal assistant who does that, and they work with BASC to actually do the classes and everything like that. That is partially funded via levy of the amount of $10,000, and the remainder of it is funded via a grant from the state of Minnesota. For the last 10 plus years, that grant has come from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. However, with the state of Minnesota reshuffling its agencies, that agency is now being folded into this new, or that grant is now being folded into this new Department of Youth and Family Services. We normally write for the grant in the fall or sometimes in the early weeks of the new year. The Kim Graham, who runs BASC, has been contacting the grant administrator on that all fall and is told, don't worry, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. We were told about 2.5 weeks ago that, guess what, for 2025, we're not going to issue that grant this year. We're going to just, we're too busy putting together this new agency that, we'll probably issue it in 2026, but, for now, we're not going to do it, which puts us in a pickle because without that, it basically funds the staffing position at BASC that administers the work. So I'm coming to you, to let you know about that situation. I've talked to Mr. Berry about it from his lobbying perspective that it's yet another unfunded mandate that the state puts on us that doesn't, then puts a mandate, doesn't fund it, then offers us grant money to properly fund it, and then pulls the grant money back. It's frustrating. You guys know that already. Because I have had so much salary savings, I'm coming to you asking to utilize some of that to put towards a stopgap, if you will, for this diversion program. Again, I have been without an assistant county attorney since August. I don't want to touch 2024 budgeted money. I want to touch 2025 budgeted money. I'm going to need the entire month of January, the entire month of February, and probably halfway into March with budgeted funds for salary that are going to go unutilized because I'm down an attorney. I'm asking for the permission to take $20,000 of that unspent salary money and put towards my diversion program as a stopgap. I will tell you, myself personally, I've also reached out to several foundations in the community, including Nielsen, who is going to hear this on the 20th. We've reached out to Northwest Minnesota Foundation. I am trying to scramble to get funds from other sources. Our deficit for the program is about $80,000 for calendar year 2025. We are hopeful that we may be able to get the grant administrator to allow us to write that earlier than waiting until 2026, maybe do the second half of the year. We're kind of pulling all the stops and trying everything we can do. My ask for you tonight is to give me 20 grand that's already budgeted. It's just allowing me to shift it. Again, that'll hopefully buy us some time to find those fundings to keep it permanent. So that's the ask. If you have any questions, I'm right here.
Commissioner Carlson, do you have any questions?
Yeah, David, thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question is, what do we do going forward in 2026?
Again, the communication we've gotten so far is 2026 the grant will probably be, I haven't got guarantee of that as much as a verbal, game of telephone that, yeah, it's probably going to be there. So I don't know, Commissioner Carlson. That is a good question. For right now, if permanent funding is in jeopardy, I'm essentially going to have to reduce the service, or it's going to go on to levy. exploring other options, for permanent funding. Right now, we need a little bit of gap funding to allow us to even explore those permanent fundings. Because right now we're, the way Basque runs, and the way the grant had been written for the year 2024 and then into 2025, we usually don't get funding on that grant until March, April. And so Basque usually carries that grant or carries that position and goes in the deficit for January, February, and then gets backfilled with the grant. So right now it is in the red. And I assume if I don't get stopgap funding, that it'll just mothball almost immediately. So I don't have an answer for 2026. I'm working on it.
And then a follow-up, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering who's the commissioner that's assigned to the BAS committee?
Commissioner Winger.
Has he had a chance to look at this?
Yeah, we talked about it at the last meeting.
Okay. Well, with that, Mr. Chair, for the sake of further discussion, I would move that we allow the county attorney office salary saving to be diverted to the juvenile diversion program run through BAS.
That's in the form of a motion. So I'll take that as a motion for approval. Do I hear a second to that?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Winger seconds it. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Commissioner Sumner.
so, Commissioner Carlson asked, what happens, going forward. I'm hopeful that, with this does pass, that Basque and the, attorney's office would come, and give a presentation to the board sometime in the future about, what could be the potential impacts, if the DYFS decides that they don't want to reallocate future funding, something to, because I mean, 20,000 doesn't seem like a lot to the levy, but it is a lot to the levy, in Beltrami County. So
Yeah.
Hopefully we can have a conversation.
Absolutely. I'd be more than willing to do that. I would hate to volunteer Ms. Graham at this point because she's kind of scrambling right now, but once we get things settled down, I would be absolutely willing to come and present
Chair,
ideas.
Attorney Hanson, I think we're all scrambling, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Sumner and Attorney Hanson. I think that ideally, once you have found out whether you can get any funding from the Northwest Minnesota Foundation, Nielsen Foundation, whatever, and have kind of a solution or a potential solution, bring that back to us so we can make sure that this, hopefully continues through this year anyways. And then as soon as you know something more, we can address that ideally before the budget timeframe or by the budget timeframe later this summer.
Of course, I'll be glad to keep you updated.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Commissioner Sumner?
Yes.
Commissioner Winger?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gould?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so it passes 5-0. Thank you, Attorney
Okay,
Hanson.
gentlemen, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
All right, that moves us on to the easement item that was moved from the natural resource approval of the easement with the city of Bemidji for the roundabout. I think Commissioner Carlson, you requested moving that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments. I really appreciate Sam coming in and giving us his perspective on the project. Sam's been a great engineer for the city of Bemidji, and I appreciate his work. I did think though that maybe the one, and I was wanted to take into account Commissioner Sumner's comments that maybe we should have Bruce come before. If Bruce could come at the next meeting and just sort of back up the things. There is roundabout fatigue, let's face it. But I'd be more comfortable voting in favor of this if Bruce came and kind of gave his blessing. That would help me out.
So are you?
So at that, Mr. Chair, I would table this until next meeting and have Bruce, our engineer, come to the work session to explain and give us his input, and let's take up a final vote at the next meeting. So I moved to table the
Motion to table by Commissioner Carlson. Is there a second to that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Commissioner Winger seconds the motion to table. So we'll call for the vote on the commission or the tabling. Commissioner Carlson,
yes.
Commissioner Sumner,
Yes.
Commissioner Winger, Commissioner Gould,
No.
and I vote yes. So it passes 4-1. Thank you, Commissioner Carlson. And I think it'd be good for us to have a little bit more time and knowledge of before making an important decision on that. The jail project, back to the wording, I think, is what we were down to is if we were going to make an adjustment to adding myself to the approval process, should there be needed of a emergency approval. So,
Mr. Chair,
yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Gould.
move to approve the jail project payment authority and approval policy as presented with the following edit in item number 3, where it says, it's the third line down in number 3. After county administrator and D&O committee chair, add and Commissioner Gosvig. And then in parentheses, or alternate if Commissioner Gosvig is unavailable. Jointly shall ... the same text is presented.
You have that, Diane and Tom? Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion?
I would second that, Mr. Chair.
We have a second by Commissioner Carlson. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would advise that you pick the alternate
I was gonna
now.
suggest.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And is the alternate for just me, or is it for me or Commissioner Carlson? If neither of us, if one or the other of us wasn't available, that we would want 2 commissioners to
Well-
hopefully be voting on it? Is that what
Well,
you're
yes,
getting at?
Good point, because the whole point is to have 2 commissioners sign off on it in addition to the county administrator. So I wonder if we shouldn't approve this motion and then decide on who the alternates will be in a separate motion?
I don't know.
Or I'm fine with we should name an alternate for sure for if Craig isn't available.
So you could just make that as part of this whole motion, just change the wording to include, the original 3. And if one of those is not available, then alternate would be
Yes.
whichever one of you wants to be an alternate. Whatever.
Well, I was gonna
Well-
suggest,
Well, there you
because
go.
they're an officer of the board. So
All right. So we add as an alternate,
if Commissioner Winger.
if
is
Commissioner
willing.
Winger is okay with that. Okay, so add Commissioner Winger as an alternate if Commissioner Carlson or Gosvig is not available for that emergency decision.
And then if Commissioner Carlson isn't available as the chair of the D&O committee,
Winger would sit in for him or whatever, but that's the way. Right, that he'd be the alternate to either one.
Yep.
Okay. So that's your motion. Do I hear a second to that motion?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Gould, second by Commissioner Carlson for the amended jail project, emergency funding. And we'll call for the roll call vote. Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, a little more for discussion.
Oh, okay.
Do we need to name another alternate? Would that take care of every scenario if based on who might be absent for whatever reason?
I don't know, I guess it gets to be pretty close to the same, I mean, I guess
So
how
let's
far do we go with it? I mean, do we have an alternate for Administrator Barry? I
alternate
mean,
for
you know,
I don't, because we might still be short a commissioner if both you and John are gone. Then it would just be Scott, and we'd still need another
It'd be
commissioner.
pretty unlikely,
These are-
you know.
These are
Well,
not-
we wouldn't have to physically be in Bemidji, Mr. Chair. All you have to do is be available by phone and by email to be able to look at a document, look at the reasoning why, and then to be able to chime in, support or not support for a PCO or a CO. You don't have to be in Bemidji. You just have to be accessible by phone pretty much, which most of us are basically 24/7 available by phone.
I think it's gonna be highly unlikely that we'll have to even do this, and even more unlikely that we wouldn't have two of the three of us available. So if you're okay with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
yep, Commissioner Sumner.
So I guess seeing that there's a lot of savings and maybe an update sometime, or if you have a minute, Mr. Berry, how are these savings happening? Are we cutting programming? Are we cutting corners? It's kind of curious to be saving so much money and not having an explanation.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Sumner, I don't have all the details for you, but I have some. So if you want more details after I'm done, then let me know. We'll get more to you. But essentially, the types of savings we're talking about so far, the first and largest one is the bidding savings. So obviously, when the bidding came back, we were about 5 million collectively under all trades, if you average them all together. So that money, as you know, got earmarked and set over for the old jail. So we put that money essentially to doing something with the old jail, which is a project, as you know, last time we met, we've just started to kick off with the building condition assessment. Additional adjustments, one of them we talked about at some length a few meetings ago was the Cat 6 versus the Cat 6 cabling. That's going to save us considerable funding. There was additional savings based upon the type of cell infrastructure we were choosing, also the type of precast, those types of things. So we're not sacrificing, I would say, and Commissioner Carlson could probably second this, but we're not sacrificing the quality. It might be an appearance issue, for example, to avoid a cost. So do we need that color gray or that color brown? Probably not, but it doesn't change functionally the facility itself. Other improvements are things like getting rid of doors or changing out ingress egress or some of those types of things, which are also deductive change orders. Materials like tiles, for example, do we really need that tile, or can we spec a different type of flooring that actually reduces the cost as well? So those are the types of things. We're not changing programming areas, functional design, layout, none of that stuff's changing. It's really just sort of the specifications of the materials for the most part at this point in time that we're utilizing to achieve the savings.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would just add that Kraus Anderson's been doing a great job, and so is Klein McCarthy, doing a great job of what they call value engineering. And what they do is take a critical eye at the way things have been done in the past on structures like this, and then look at new methods that are commonplace now and acceptable. So the value engineering is what's really saving a bunch of money.
Thank you, Commissioner Carlson. And I'm glad to hear Administrator Berry say that the bid savings was not getting just dumped into a contingency bucket. As I don't want to hear that from a finance point of view. All right, so we have a motion and a second for the approval of the changed jail project fund or emergency funding resolution or whatever. For the vote on that, Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Sumner,
Yes.
Commissioner Winger, Commissioner Gould,
Yes.
and I vote yes, so it passes 5-0. Thank you. On to the federal and state funding update. Administrator Berry.
All right, I think Diane's going to tee us up with a presentation here quickly. I know we're running way past your bedtime as it relates to the length of these meetings historically, so we'll try to speed through this, but okay, perfect. So at the last meeting, the question came up as part of my administrator's report. We were talking about the doom and gloom of the federal and state government, particularly on funding front. There were 3 questions that were asked of me to come back and provide to the board. I did this in a separate email to you already, so you have the documents. But I was also asked to share it with the public, so that's kind of why we're here today. So the first question was, how much federal and state funding does Beltrami County receive? The second one is, what are the uses of those federal and state funds? And then finally, what's the likely impact to Beltrami County on the reductions or potential reductions for federal and state funding that come our way? So the first thing I want to do is throw up the slide that talks about our revenues. Yeah, I did want to throw up too. Thanks for that. But here's the slide that came out of our 2023 revenue sources. This is straight out of our budget. And the reason I'm going to 2023 is because those financial statements have been audited. So, otherwise we don't have the 2024s that have been audited yet. So, we felt more comfortable with these particular numbers. So we're just a little bit out of date, but things are pretty similar. If you look at the 2025 fiscal year revenue sources pie chart, that looks really similar to this, maybe a percentage or two off. What's important about this is that essentially an intergovernmental section of this makes up the dominant funding source. So around 43% or so of the funding that comes to the county comes from federal and state funds. Now, this is a big deal. On the one hand, it says, wow, we're really good at spending other people's money, right? On the other hand, when that money spigot sort of starts to wane back a little bit, then we feel the impact a lot more than we would otherwise. So as you know here, property taxes only make up about a third of our budget. And just as I said, this will amplify the impacts to our budget when or if federal and state revenue sources get dialed back. So let's talk a little bit based on the financial statements that were audited. We've received about $8 million directly from the federal sources. And the primary uses for those several sources or federal sources are up here. It's not every single dollar, so I'm not accounting for every single dollar. I'm getting kind of close to the nearest $500,000 or so. But essentially about 1.13 was used for WIC, Women in Infants and Children, and SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs. 564 for public safety grants and programs, about 333,000 for emergency management performance and also disaster grants. And we did receive several of those. And then the dominant source of revenue that gets used in our county from federal funds goes towards health and human services programs, about 73% of that 8 million. And that's for medical assistance, foster care, child support enforcement, and TANF, or temporary assistance for needy families. Some of these dollars, just to mention, it gets complicated. You saw the tiny print in the documents that I sent to you. It gets really complicated really fast. So suffice it to say that some of these funds actually are just pass-through dollars as well. So we don't actually hang on to them wholly. When we look at state sources, we actually receive about 41.2 million, at least in 2023. And 21.8 million of those were in shared revenues. And the prevalent sources that those funds were used for include highway user tax, a disparity reduction aid, police and public safety aid, county program aid, out-of-home placements, local homeless prevention, statewide affordable housing, agricultural market value credits, E911 system, and also the EIS and riparian protection aid. And then finally, Red Lake reimbursements, about 478,000 as well. So this is the prevalent sources of those funds. About 4 million was also state reimbursements for administration, health, and human services. So these are reimbursement dollars that come back to us as we expend for administering programs for the state. We did also receive 2.7 million in PILT payments, or payment in lieu of taxes, and then about 12.7 in the form of various state grants. Those predominant sources came about 10.8 million for Health and Human Services Department, about 623,000 for the Public Health Department. And just a plug to those folks, they're completely grant funded. We've talked about that many times in our community health board meetings. That's also where those dollars come from. Pollution and soil and water conservation resources, Veterans Affairs programming, and public safety also make up the form of the majority of the grant revenue that we receive also from the state. Also, all total, when you look at the whole package here, 8 million coming from the federal government, about 41.2 from state revenue sources. We have about 49 9.2 million of our budget that came in fiscal year 2023 from federal and state revenue sources. When if you remember back to 2023, our budget at that time was really darn close to $100 million, which means that essentially federal and state funding made up almost 50% of our entire budget. Again, back to the statement, that's really great as long as that money keeps coming. It's really not great if that money starts getting dialed back. And so that is the problem. How do we predict and how do we respond to adjustments? And essentially, it really is impossible. We just don't know enough about these adjustments, but we have some insights. So I thought I'd spend just a few minutes talking about some of those insights. At the federal level, we know that the political and the financial outlook is very dynamic right now. Almost daily, things are changing at the federal level, very top of the administration. So there's a lot of government uncertainty. And in fact, if you look at just the first 20 or 25 days of the new administration, what you'll see is that there's been a lot of activity. And this activity is creating enormous questions right now. I mean, nobody really knows what's going to happen or how things are going to shake out. We've been hearing a lot of things. We've got funding freezes, we've got injunctions, we've got refreezes, staff layoffs, program reductions, program eliminations, reorganizations. I mean, buyouts. I mean, the list just goes on and on. We can't know what's going to happen. If you look here, almost 90 actions in the first 22 days or so of administration in the form of executive orders or memos or proclamations. And a lot of that stuff's still being shaken out, being challenged by the courts, challenged by the others, blocked by different folks. I mean, you name it. So we just really don't know how, when, how much, what's going to happen at the federal level. I mean, and we're not the only ones. I mean, we just won't know, and we won't know until, you know, and then we'll have to probably scramble. But as you know, talking initially, about 8 million of this funding that we receive is sort of hung up in some of this. Not all 8 million, of course, and what percentage and what amount we don't really. Now, if you move to state government, unfortunately, the outlook there is not a whole lot better. The state legislature is divided, as you know. It's been a first for a little while, and it's also, as many people would say, their words, not mine, highly dysfunctional. We also see that after spending a $19 billion surplus, that now budget forecasts project a $5 billion deficit in the next few years. So we've got this wild swing, both in the political and also the financial makeup, if you will, of the state government. So we're seeing kind of similar trends, just carried out a little bit differently. The governor's recent budget proposal shifts many counties. This isn't making very many people happy, whether it's counties or cities who also experience some of the same shifts, or other organizations who are seeing reductions in their revenue. A lot of people are sort of uptight
Mr. Chair.
about all of this.
I'm sorry, but the music is kind of getting to.
Oh, that might be Commissioner
I'm assuming that might be Commissioner Carlson.
elevator music at his lobby.
Yep.
Uh,
There, he muted.
oh, there you
Thank
go.
you. Go ahead, Tom.
You bet. Okay, so essentially, I think you just disabled me. All right. Yeah. So now I've lost control. We'll turn it off and we'll turn it on again. I've learned that trick from IT. They're like super awesome about that. It's like taking aspirin for. Okay, here we go. So here's what the governor's proposed budget simply on Health and Human Services side of things, because obviously that's a huge operation. It's our one of our most expensive operations. It's a lot going on. It's very complicated. Just at a high level view, kind of looking at what's recently come out in the governor's budget, we're looking and anticipating around $2 million in cost shifts. That means the state's shrinking its budget, right? Which is good news, but it's doing it by transferring those costs back onto local governments. That's not good news, because local governments are less prepared and less resourced to address these issues. And so if they don't remove the mandates that are driving these costs and instead shift the cost to the local governments, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult predicament. And of course, this is a scene that has played out year after year after year at the state legislature. It's just highly amplified this upcoming year or two. So we're very concerned about that. Just these couple of things that I've got up on the screen here, just a 5% shift, which doesn't sound like a whole lot of state funding that we used to get for disability waivers. You're gonna cut that share by 5%. That'll cost us $1.5 million just by the state saying, well, we don't want to fund the full amount that we've traditionally been doing. We're just gonna slash that by 5%. See, it's not a big deal, you guys, at the local level, but it's a big deal, and I don't think that's realized at the state level. The shift in the Minnesota Sex Offender Program, that's $145,000. So we're gonna push those costs to the county. Competency restoration, the shifts in those costs are gonna come to the county, and that's gonna cost us another $100,000. Reductions or shifts in the behavioral health fund, that's gonna cost us $80,000 to $100,000 also. Reductions in the juvenile delinquency funding, that's $90,000. You're starting to hear some of that was presented a little bit earlier as well. So essentially these unfunded or underfunded mandates, funding formula changes, and rule changes, all of them together impact the county. And they're having huge impacts because what we're seeing is at the administrative level, you can just change a funding formula and magically wipe out a certain amount of funding that a county or a city has been relying on for years and years and years to run the programs, in our case as a county, that the state requires us to run. Keep in mind that we're only one of 10 states in the entire union that has state supervised but county administered programs. That's a great spot for the state to be in. It's not such a great spot for counties to be in. And that's why that model probably isn't used as widely. But that allows the state to do these types of things, and that puts the burden back onto local governments. So I'll keep in mind here, there are thousands of new laws that are developed each and every year. Just in the 23-24 legislative biennium, over 5,200 bills were introduced. So if you don't think that county administrators and city administrators and organizations, executive directors and stuff aren't busy during the legislative session, this is what we're largely doing. We're tracking this stuff, we're writing papers, we're just mobilizing constantly for that 4 or 5 months, trying to figure out what's this gonna do, how's it gonna happen, is it gonna happen, what degree is it, can we mitigate for it, can we prevent it? All of these things are going on and they take a lot of effort and a lot of time. Many of these bills come in the form of unfunded mandates, and depending upon which senator or representative from the state government that you talk to, they'll tell you that over 50 or 60 different mandates have come just in the last couple of years. I'll just highlight one, just one that came last year, and tell you what its impact is on the county. And this is the African American Family Preservation and Child Welfare Disproportionality Act. We were one of the first counties that evaluated this legislation and determined what the cost impact would be to implement this unfunded mandate. And that estimate has been developed at $1.3 million, just for us to change the administrative process around how we're going to comply with this mandate. Now, we're not judging the mandate, right? If this is important to the state and we administer on behalf of the state, that's fine. We make no judgments on the mandates that get passed. But if it's important to the state should back it. That's where I think a lot of your counties and cities are coming from. I'll give you another example of just a funding formula change. By the stroke of a pen, somebody in the administration decides they want to change the formula for the child protection opioid response allocation, and we lost $148,000 right there, gone. This is preventative funding. This funding is what we use for neonatal services for people who are addicted to drugs and such. This is money that we invest to prevent problems that are actually way more expensive to resolve. And that money's gone now. So we have to figure out, can we live with that? What needs to happen? Rulemaking. Here's another area that a lot of people don't think about because we hear so much about unfunded mandates. In rulemaking, we also have administration deciding, well, we don't like the way this standard is anymore, so we're going to change that standard. And then we're going to change another standard or another requirement or another specification. And this is what happened to us with the jail, right? We need more programming space. We need more staffing. We have too little of this. We need a lot more of that. And essentially rendered our facility obsolete, if you will. And that's required us as a county to then prematurely have to go and build a new facility, in part. Now, there was a lot of dynamics to that particular story, but that's a big motivator, is a lot of what happened at the state level in regard to rulemaking forced our hands in making adjustments at the jail. So now we're building a new $80 million jail, had to come up with a whole new funding source to do that. The same thing is actually happening as we speak, as it relates to the demolition landfill. So we have a demolition landfill. It's not supposed to be, I mean, we have life until 2039, but now we're going to be told we have to close it in around 2028, 2029. So we're going to lose 10 years on that infrastructure because the state's making a specification change for how demolition landfills should function. So that's going to cost us about $9.1 million. So it's not just unfunded mandates, it's rule changes, it's funding formula shifts, changes, those kinds of things. They all have impacts to our budget. So just as a reminder, we'll get to the sort of total impact here. As I mentioned, you know, a large majority of our budget comes, or revenues come from state and federal revenue sources, and a much smaller amount comes from revenues from property taxes. We don't really have a lot of places to go to get money. If we are going to have to keep the same programs going that the state mandates us to keep going, you know, I've heard people say in the community, and I've heard people say at legislative meetings and other stuff, I've heard this, well, why don't we just tell the state we're not going to do that anymore? If they take the funding away from us, and they don't take the mandate away, then let's just not do it. Well, that's a tough spot to be in, because they might cut 4 million out of our budget, but look how much more we still get from them. I just talked about 41 million. So if they cut 4 million, they're still giving us 37. They could come right back to us, and you could get in this cycle where, okay, we're going to cut another 7 million. We're going to cut another 10 million. We're going to cut, you know, see what I'm saying? It just, where does it stop? And so it's a difficult sort of game to be playing. I'll just give you this figure. This changes year by year, and this is a rough number, but essentially every increase in the levy, 1% increase in the levy, only nets us about $300,000. It's a pretty low number. It's lower for other counties. It's much larger in other counties. And this is largely because we have a small tax base. We keep talking about this. Only a third of our counties got taxable land in it. 3,000 square miles, less than a third or around a third is actually taxable, property tax wise. And so the impacts, if you use that figure, the impacts from recent proposed state activities alone, we'll just add it up here just really quickly. And this is only the things I brought to your attention today. I mean, the list is, I mean, we've got another probably 3 hours to go if you want to get to everything. And I'm not even sure we can cover everything, because I'm not even sure I know everything for that matter. But $2 million we know is right now on the table as potentially impacting our budget. That would be a 6.7% levy increase if we had to transfer that revenue source from state to the levy. 148,000 we talked about for the reduction in the opioid funding. That would require us to raise another 148,000 or 0.5 on the levy. 1.3 million to deal with the implementation of the African American and Child Welfare Disproportionality Act. That's another 4.3. Those are just those couple. I'm not even, you know, we're not really talking about all of them. So just with those, that's 3.45 million or 11.5% levy increase, right? Just to take care of those small ones. That does not include any of our own operational needs. As you know, insurance goes up, we get stuck with insurance. It's not like we can't pay our insurance, right? And then insurance goes up 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10% in a year. Staff wages go up. We get inflationary costs for buying vehicles or buying HVAC equipment or other things, pens and pencils, you know, paper, whatever it is. So that doesn't even account for our ability to buy any of that stuff. And of course, this is not a full accounting. These dollars I'm just throwing up here are simply as an example. They don't include all of the current mandates that we're under. We're actually trying to get a little better idea. The staff and I are working on a study right now to figure out, to the greatest degree we can, at least within the last couple of years, how have mandates impacted our budget? So that's an exercise we're trying to get an answer to. But essentially, it doesn't include all of that stuff. It doesn't include impacts from the jail that we talked about. This number here, it doesn't include impacts from the demo landfill closures, federal or state mandates, reduction in cost shifts, or things to come, because we know, I mean, we're in a legislative session, so we know there's going to be more changes and there's likely to be more unfunded mandates. So we don't know those things, but you can see we're already heavily impacted going forward. So in summary, what's this mean? Well, I don't know what it means, you know? I mean, our crystal ball's broken. We just have no clue what to expect, where to go, how we should fund, whatever. What are we gonna be forced to fund? What news coming? Like, there's just no way to know, right? So I told you, you probably wouldn't be happy with this presentation because I don't have the answers that maybe some of you are looking for. There's no way to know. So hopefully that provides a little context. We'll try to keep it positive, right? Because there's a lot of bad news in this presentation, but we should know, you know, like, and we should communicate with our legislators and with the public and others, and let them know what the impact is that the state has in regard to our budget and certainly the federal government as well.
Commissioner Sumner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tom, thank you for the presentation. I think oftentimes it's hard to prepare for the unknown, but I think with this presentation, you know, I think, you know, we can prepare a little bit. So I do appreciate you and the staff and the work that you're doing to, you know, to try to prepare. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gould.
Thank you. Thank you, Administrator Barry. I thought you did an excellent, fine job with the presentation and it was what I was looking for one. And I was happy to see the Pioneer was here. I wish Lakeland was here because the whole point for me for this was to, you know, educate the general public on how dire things are right now. And you know, I would point out that there is a response that we can take, and that is to contact our legislators every week and just remind them that, you know, we're here, we're your constituents, we don't like what's going on. What's the number one motivator for every elected official, excluding myself, of course, is reelection. And so if they don't have the support from a majority of their constituents, you know, they're going to be out of a job. And so I do appreciate your, and you might touch on this in your administrator's report, so I won't talk about it too much, but I know you did some testimony and a committee down in St. Paul a few days ago and crafted a very excellent letter pointing out the numbers and how we would certainly struggle here in Beltrami County. That's the kind of thing that we can do more of, I think, as local leaders and just as constituents. I've been contacting our congressmen and women of the area because they seem to be supporting the current administration more than Senators Klobuchar and Smith lately. So I do want to thank our senators for trying to combat some of the stuff that's being handed down. But I've been talking to the governor's office too. I've been calling and texting and emailing his office and our worry about his cost shifts proposal in his budget. We can't live with that. So we need to be contacting the governor's office too. So yeah, I appreciate the information and the public awareness. And I think we all need to be stepping it up a notch here. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Gould. Anybody else? Commissioner Carlson, have anything that you want to add?
No. Find the mute button. Sorry about the elevator music.
All right, Administrator Barry, you want to just move on into your administrator's report?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. As we sort of touched on in the last presentation, we've been actively monitoring or responding to a variety of legislative developments. And as I mentioned, also things are difficult to predict. They're dynamic. We did have some movement last week, which I appreciate. The House Human Services Policy and Finance Committee had actually donated almost an hour to local governments to come and to testify and give this type of information to them as it relates to how the governor's proposed budget will impact them. So I was asked to provide testimony to that and did. And two other county administrators and also some health and human services staff members and organizational leaders also provided testimony. A number of other people did as well. And, you know, I can tell you that at least in listening to that, being a part of that committee, nobody's happy. If you're going to be in a group, I'd rather be in that group than just everybody's happy except for Beltrami County, right? Because then that's a harder fight to win. So we have friends, and some of them are in places you wouldn't think that people that maybe wouldn't necessarily be your friends on issues like this are now your allies. So that's good news. And there is some movement that's taking place. I know Senator Green has proposed legislation that might help our landfill issue in regard to slowing down or stopping rulemaking for the MPCA as it relates to demolition landfills. And one of the things that he and I've talked about is, if the state could just recognize that when communities invest a lot of money in infrastructure that has a lifespan, we should at least get the return on investment for the lifespan we've invested in and not cut that short and ask taxpayers to pay twice for something that's not going to last near as long. So I appreciate Senator Green's efforts on that. And there are a lot of others. I know Representative Duran is also behind some legislation as well that is going to help out the county that he's working on. And so we're appreciative of the efforts that our local area legislators are putting to this. And I think it did help that we had a lot of time with them and that all of them participated in our legislative agenda discussion early in the session and earlier this year. So I think that's very helpful as well. Also, as a side note, I'm working on the airport strategic planning team, and we're working with the airport authority and also the airport affairs committee. We're developing focal areas. That's already been done. Now we're developing focal area teams, which are then going to come back and sort of build up objectives and tactics and strategies, performance metrics, timelines, and things like that to help the airport develop a path to its future. So that's kind of exciting. And so I'll be assisting in kind of structural development, and then also believe I'll be providing some training and maybe some implementation recommendations for how to implement that as well. This work is going to take several months because we have a lot of community members involved. Although it's going to be the airport strategic plan, they're doing a great job of collecting information from all of those other agencies and organizations that impact or influence or have some relation to the airport. And so that type of community planning can be long. It can take a while because you've got so many people involved. I think we'll probably have more than 25 or 30 different agencies or organizations involved in this. And that just creates a slow process. But usually if we can keep on task, it usually creates a much better outcome. So anyway, that's that. The design and operations team did finish its work as it relates to the review of the development agreement that the city had provided to us, and also the stormwater management or maintenance plan agreement. We counter-offered our thoughts and concerns and that sort of stuff. I've been told as late as this afternoon that that's in process. It looks promising at this point in time. So I'm optimistic that maybe in the next couple of days, I might be able to let you know that that's all kind of behind us. As you know, although it has been a long process with the city, it is the last process we have remaining in order to officially kick the jail off, minus one clarifying comment that we have on a fire-related issue with the state. So we're getting very close to having all of that wrapped up and remaining on schedule, which feels really good. That's all I have for you at this point in time. I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Anybody have any questions for Administrator Berry? Seeing none, we'll move on to legislative lobbying, and we'll bundle that with the commissioner reports. Commissioner Carlson, do you have anything you would like to report on?
Yeah, I was happy that I was able to go to the MnDOT Aeronautics had a stakeholder meeting on MEAN, MEAN. It's the Minnesota Electric Aviation Network. And then also the MnSAS which is the Minnesota State Aviation System Plan. Basically, you think electric aviation, you kind of chuckle when you think about that, but the reality is it's coming. And do we want to be in the network or do we not want to be in the network? And it can be some things that are just as simple as we build out infrastructure at the airport, that we make sure that we have in that infrastructure things that could be utilized by electric aviation, such as three-phase electric. And so we're in the process of building out planning area 3 with some business opportunities. And so that just for us as an airport to keep that in mind. It's a long process, a long ways down the road, but if we don't do some things now, we'll be behind the 8 ball and won't be able to be included in that network. As Tom said, we have the jail design and operations committee meeting. I'm happy to see the progress that's being made. I'm really happy about the value engineering that we're getting from Krause Anderson and from Klein McCarthy Architects. They're doing a great job and just trying to find any way that we can have the same quality outcome with less input costs. So that's been great. I had management team meeting last week, and then Commissioner Gosvig and I were both at the Airport Affairs Committee meeting, and Tom already alluded to that. So that's it for me. Oh, and by the way, thank you all for your indulgence and patience. Well, we had an unexpected medical appointment that we had to go to, but so I appreciate your allowing me to do this by Zoom.
Thank you, Commissioner Carlson. And Commissioner Gould?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee meetings lately, pretty typical agenda items, nothing really significant to report out, but I've been attending SHAC, Beltrami, HRA, and BICAP lately. I was not able to attend the MMIW walk the other day, the annual event for missing and murdered Indigenous women, but I did notice Sheriff Riggs and Deputy Rupert and our Chief of Police for the city of Bemidji were all in attendance and supportive. So I just wanted to mention that and appreciate them in attendance. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Gould. Commissioner Winger?
There we go. Thank you, Commissioner Chair. I did do chat about. Didn't get any hate mail or nasty phone calls, so it must have gone somewhat okay.
Has anybody asked you for autographs or anything
No,
after it? No.
and I haven't seen it, so or heard it, so. But I was told I have a face for radio, so that's okay. I did attend the Beltrami Area Services Collaborative meeting. Talked a lot about the diversion program, like Dave talked about. And they brought up things about that, you know, you don't think about and what it would cost us if that went away, you know, and the programs that, you know, the things that get cut and then they have to actually go to court and what that can cost us if they have to go through other steps. So, you know, it's really imperative that some of these programs stay intact, even though they may cost some money, which is hard to look at sometimes. They also talked about they had people there from the schools and one of the social workers that goes from 3 different schools now, and the benefit to having that person at the schools and how much they've seen the increase in attendance and number of problems with children going down because that person's there to address them and talk to them. And so it's really, really nice to hear that a lot of things are being taken care of without having to go through some of the other channels. So, and it really de-escalates from what they were talking about, the use of, you know, some of the teams that deal with the kids when they get out of line and she just comes in and they're used to dealing with her. So it makes it really simple. So that was really nice to hear. Also attended the behavioral health meeting. Again, like all of them, everybody's wondering where the money's going to come from, what's going to get cut, and they're scared and they're, you know, trying to figure out what to do when you don't know. And so everybody's kind of in that same boat. Attended the solid waste this morning. Again, the same kind of stuff, they're wondering where the money's gonna come from for these mandates but they have some good plans coming and you'll probably be able to tell them better. I did get a phone call today that I did say I would bring this up tonight, and one of the employees from the license center, he called and said how impressed he was and how nice he was treated at the license center, and just wanted people to know that Corey had done such a good job and was so helpful, and he said people don't hear that enough, and so he wanted to make sure that we were aware and made people aware of the good job they were doing. And I got a call, excuse me, from some of the town boards concerned about animal control stuff. Evidently, there was a glitch in the computer system that the sheriff's office got, the new system, and they didn't get in for part of the stuff that was in the programming, didn't program for animal control citations. And animal control, you can't just write citations on paper anymore and send them to the court. It all has to be done through a computer system. And since it's not in the computer system, they're not able to cite for some of these things. And I did talk to Jason. They're working on that one. He wasn't really aware of it too much until that meeting. And so I have been invited to their meeting coming up for animal control stuff, just to show up there. So I will go to that when they actually lock in the time and place, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Winger. Commissioner Sumner?
Thank you. Well, Commissioner Winger, I hope you're still enjoying, being commissioner and learning a lot. And it sounds like you're receiving a lot of the same phone calls, I'm sure, that we all experienced when we first came on board. So thank you. For myself, I have the Black Duck ambulance on Thursday, the Upper and Lower Red Lake One Watershed One Plan next Tuesday. I also want to mention that the AMC Legislative Conference is going on next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I believe. Those are the dates.
Yeah.
And then following that, I will be attending the NACO Legislative Conference out in DC, flying out Friday and returning Tuesday. So I will be absent for the next board meeting. I just want to let you guys know. That is it for my commissioner's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sumner. And as Commissioner Winger mentioned, we had our solid waste committee meeting this morning, and we had tasked Brian, our director in that department, to get us the longevity of our current landfill, and I was, pleasantly surprised that it was longer than what we thought, basically 10 years beyond what our current permit is. So, permits are typically for 10 years. So if the rulemaking could get halted and we could get a renewal of our permit at the end of 2029, we'd actually be able to just continue on using our current demolition landfill as it sits and avoid that $9.1 million that we just saw a little bit ago from Administrator Barry. So hopefully we can get some success on just put the pause button on at the legislature and the governor to not let those agencies push those mandates down and cost us so much more money. The only other thing I want to report on tonight, we had our Fair Board meeting last night, and I was brought into the area of the building up in the front where the office and where the county extension is, and it was rather chilly in there. They have space heaters going because they're unfortunately the old electric slab heat that's in there. A lot of the coils are failing, and so that's something at a future meeting I'd like to probably bring up. What since that extension is a county function, and that the building and the property and stuff is our county property, what we can do to look at helping them. I know it's not something that we'll do immediately this year, that I don't, they'll have to probably live with the space heaters, and it's hopefully going to be warming up next week, but that yeah, and I actually did tell them to get Beltrami Electric to come over and and, see, but I think there's enough of them that they're not gonna jackhammer up 13 spots in the floor to try to fix it. It's just, yeah, it's more than, that fixing it would be one thing, but jackhammering the cement up especially when they just did in that 4-H building, they just redid the floor like a year ago, and, yeah, that wouldn't be pretty. So, looking at other options there and seeing what we can do to help them out in the future. And that's it. I've got a airport authority meeting John and I do tomorrow night. He's hopefully going to be back in time for that. And then an HRDC meeting on Thursday night and so on. So got a busy schedule too. That's it for me. And everybody check their meeting schedule. I think I might have the next couple of meetings for the management team, and that I don't have it in front of me here, but I think we did some swapping around there. So anyhow, make sure you're checking that, and I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Winger, second by Gould. All in favor? I guess we'll do the roll call. So Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Sumner,
No.
Commissioner Winger.
Yes.
Commissioner Gould,
Yes.
and Commissioner Gosvick, yes. So 4-1, and Commissioner Sumner has to stay after school.